Hi, bestie. Welcome to your Big Three podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Kylene, and on the show, we get to explore our humanity through the lens of astrology, decoding a different Big Three every episode. Whether you're an astrology enthusiast or a little astro curious, welcome. Hello. Hey, bestie. It's your girl, Jasmine Kylene. And welcome to the very first episode of your Big Three podcast. I can't believe that this is happening. This has been gestating, incubating in my heart, mind, soul, and boobs since I can even remember. And I did get to a point where I never thought I'd do it just because I feel like I looked at the world and I thought, you know what we don't need any more of? Podcasts. Truly. But in fact, I think we're polluted with podcasts. However, I am of the belief that even if a space is oversaturated, I do think that however you decide to do what it is that you want to do, you are bringing something unique to a space, even if it seems to be too crowded. So I, being a journalist and also an astrology enthusiast, feel like this is very tied to my dharma. And so I'm doing it. And I don't really care. I mean, I hope that it reaches who it needs to reach, and I hope that it does well, of course, but I'm not centering or valuing it by how it performs or if it brings any sort of monetary value into my life. I really just think my soul and spirit need a space to connect with other humans in a way that is different from the other spaces where I do interviews and stuff like that. But also I want to be able to practice astrology in a way that impacts more people and is meaningful. So that's this. So hi, thank you so much for listening. I also have been wanting to, or planning to at the very least, start this podcast by doing a little check-in on how I am doing and maybe offer any mirroring or maybe a journaling prompt relative to how I am doing, in the assumption that you may be experiencing anything relatively similar, because I think the whole point of this podcast is to highlight the fact that we're all kind of going through the same thing in different fonts and different colors and different ages and flavors. We're all kind of doing this human thing together. So yeah, for those unfamiliar with me, if you haven't followed my journey or just who I am on any social media platform, my name is Jasmine Kylene. I am 28 years old. I'll be 29. Oh, well, by the time this podcast premieres, I'll be 29. Yeah, behind the curtain, this was recorded before February 5th, but being released after February 5th. So I'm 29 years old now in the future. I am an only child. I'm an Aquarius. I'm just a girl doing her absolute best, but I'm currently amidst my Saturn return. And I think that me launching this podcast has so much to do with what I think Saturn return is teaching me, which is Saturn and Pisces in my fourth house. I think has much to do with a lot of different things, but in a lot of ways, bringing discipline to my spiritual practice and coming back home to myself and to my innate and authentic desire. I think for the past year, maybe 2 years, I have been giving so much of my life force energy to spaces that do not feel spiritually intentional, just for the sake of stability and financial, money. Just money. And I think that I am coming home to the fact that money is important, of course, but nothing is going to flow or nourish me in a way that's sustainable without me feeling satiated and a matter of purpose. So yeah, I think doing something like this is really gonna help me feel more home within myself. And all I can do is start it and try and see if that's true. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I may sound more withered. If you know me well, you know that I am usually just a ball of life and lightning in a bottle. And I'm and I just bring light and illuminate every room I step in. But if you are used to me in that format, you may hear me and be like, Jazz sounds a little bit tired. That's because she is. Life has, and in particular, my Saturn return has really has asked a lot of me. Not to go into too much detail, just because I don't even know if I can emotionally, but I am dealing with family members kind of going through big health things and kind of needing to be a caretaker in that space and sort of forfeiting a lot of the structure of what my life was in order to sacrifice a lot of what makes me feel like myself in order to show up for my family and be a good daughter and all of that. I hope that makes sense without being too vague. I'm sure at some point I'll get more into what I'm going through right now, but just in short, my Saturn return is really growing me up right now, and I am not resisting it. There's a lot of me that wants to resist it, but I am letting it happen. And I think that that is how your Saturn return can go as smoothly as possible if you don't resist the way that it is maybe forcing you to grieve, but rather lean into it and find pleasure in the discomfort, if that's even possible. So, yeah, if you are in any way relating to that sentiment, a journaling prompt I'd love to offer you is there something in my life that is calling to be grieved or to be mourned? I think that sometimes we can start new projects or start new chapters and be so excited about the unknown or the newness of it that we don't give our bodies and our brains space and time to grieve what we're leaving behind. Even if we're leaving behind something that needs to be left behind, even if you're leaving like a relationship that doesn't serve you or a job that you're grateful to be leaving, even if what's dying is something that needs to die and that you're excited to have die, it's still important that you allot the time and space to grieve what was, because change is still jarring and change is still at times abrupt. And I think, yeah, just worthy of being acknowledged. So, yeah, take some time to see if there's any endings that call for you to like acknowledge it and honor it and, process some grief. Whether that's, if you want to, like I said, journal through it as a journal prompt, or also if you want to like kind of set that as an intention and move through some somatic movement, and maybe some of that grief is living in your hips or in your neck. Just give yourself the time and space to express what you don't want to ultimately just like live and calcify in the body. So that's that on that. But anyway, I'm so grateful that you're joining me for this very first episode of your Big Three. If you don't already know, the whole premise of this podcast is to kind of explore somebody's chart, and in particular the big three, with them, and kind of explore how it has informed the way that they show up and the way that they are and the way that they've built their lives. So, my very first guest on this podcast is none other than Tara Keeny. She is someone who waltzed into my life. For those of you who don't know, I'm half Spanish, and so I've spent a lot of my time and a lot of my life in Madrid, Spain, where my family's from. And we met in Madrid because she lived there for 9 years. And she's one of the best gifts that city has given me outside of, like, obviously my family. But I truly don't even know how it is that the stars aligned us. But she is my cosmic sister. We have related so much because we have the same moon sign and Venus and Mars. And I think that that has allowed us to see a lot of ourselves in each other. And I do think that she, as a writer and as a poet and as a person who really just drinks life completely, I've learned so much. And I know that so many people can learn so much in the way that she has so bravely lived. So I'm so excited for you to listen to this conversation. As I was conducting and being part of the conversation, I remember wishing that I was a third party so that I could be taking notes. So I'm jealous of anyone who gets to just listen to this, because there are so many notes that you can take. And I will probably just take my own notes when I watch this back or listen to this back. But she's such a gift to me, to humanity, and I'm so grateful that you're now going to get introduced to her. So without further ado, here is your Big Three with Tara. Oh my God. Okay. So welcome to your Big Three. So I have to immediately say that this podcast idea has been gestating in my little womb since the dawn of time. However, you are the first person that I'm having on this, and for such intentional and distinct reason. And that is because I have found that like the things that I relate to nobody else in the world on are exactly what we have in common. And I think that beyond just like our spirits having to have found each other, I do think it has so much to do with like the overlap in our astrology and how distinct parts of our chart had made us the way that we are. So I want to immediately say your chart, and correct me if the chart data gave me anything wrong, but Pisces Sun, right? I'm like, because I know you, but Pisces Sun, Leo Moon, Leo Rising, Aries Mercury, which is very iconic, Pisces Venus, which same, Aquarius Mars, which same. Is that who you are? Is this correct? Is this the woman before me? Okay. So we're gonna get into the tea. And in the intro, I've introduced who you are and stuff, and obviously I'll give you a chance to. But something that I've been enjoying doing, or that I'm gonna enjoy doing with this, is I'm gonna immediately say some celebrities who have your chart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, or like at the very least, they have your sun and moon combination, and tell me if you feel connected to them at all. Little Sims.
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Did you know Lil Sims? Like, have you listened to her?
Not really.
I feel like if you got into it, you'd get into it.
Okay.
It's truly the most random list I've ever looked up. So Dakota Fanning, did you know this?
No, but like somehow I can feel that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Dakota Fanning, we have Eva Mendes and Lily Collins.
I knew that about Eva Mendes.
And I see her in you.
I did not know that about Lily Collins, but I could see it also.
Well, Emily in Paris is like everything that you are.
I'm ashamed to admit that.
I know. We
Of
have, were you a Hills fan growing up? Like, did you ever watch the show?
course.
So Whitney Port, do you remember her?
Yeah, I've never forgot.
She's on she
Interesting. Okay.
Queen Latifah,
Oh, wow.
Javier Bardem, a fellow Spaniard, Nicky Jam. I don't know if you're a Nicky Jam enthusiast
Back in the day.
back in the day.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. And last but not least, Benji Madden,
Who's
the
that?
hotter of the Madden brothers. You know Joel Madden and Benji Madden?
I'm not sure.
I'll send them to you after. They were like emo boys. I think one married Cameron Diaz and the other one married Nicole Richie.
Oh, I definitely know, like way back in the day. But you guys off that so casually as if be like top of mind right now. But wow, what an eclectic list. Oh,
I know, and there you are, and you're the star of all of them. I don't see any through line with any of those people.
I think the through line is like the whimsy combined with the like theatricality.
Period. Yes. And you know what? And I think what even speaks more to that is the fact that no one with any Pisces or Aquarian placements are going to look like anyone else with the Pisces and Aquarian placements. Because I think those are two distinct signs that manifest so differently person to person.
Mm.
And let's immediately talk about yours. So, one of the first things that I wanted to say about you as a person and you as your chart is that something I found that we share in common that has been kind of like we found solace in each other finding this in common is that we find more comfort in our solitude than not. And while most people around us are living in terror of being alone, we have to confront the terror of surrendering our solitude should we not be alone. So, what part of your chart do you feel like that is, and how has that shown up in your life?
Oh my God. So that theme that we're discussing, which like we can look at it two ways, right? Like we can look at it as I'm comfortable on my own and that's badass and really cool. But on the other side of that coin is like I'm terrified of intimacy. And that's what we bonded over way back in the day.
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting because I have these placements that would really put me as like a relationship person. And I am such a romantic. You know, I've got my sun in Pisces and my Venus in Pisces, but it's really that Mars in Aquarius, which for me falls into the seventh house of in romance and relationship. So it's like, you know, it's also I have my Pisces in the seventh house as well. So it's really just having Mars in the seventh is sort of about learning the art of intimate conflict. And that's something that I've really struggled with and sort of practiced radical avoidance in mastering. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say that, yeah, it's my Mars and Aquarius in seventh that makes me really comfortable in solitude. And anybody who's a Leo rising and has an Aquarius ruled seventh house is going to have that natural inclination or may have that inclination or be more comfortable on their own because Aquarius is all about, you know, being the individual, the rebel, like not conforming, really standing out. And I think sometimes that can automatically be in contradiction to partnership, which is about, you know, merging and melding.
Yes. Oh my God. Wait, you couldn't have said that more beautifully. I'd love to know when you confront your innate desire without any sort of influence of what has been told to you externally, do you feel like your true desire is partnership or is your true desire radical independence?
No, my true desire is a partnership. I mean, also, like, I have a lot of Pisces energy in my chart, right? My Sun and my Venus. And Pisces is all about like merging souls with everybody, you know? So
Yeah.
I do have that conflict between, and you and I talk about this a lot, like freedom and, you know, sort of the process of individuation. You know what I mean? Like that Aquarian desire and goal, and then Pisces, which wants to merge with everyone. Deep down, what I desire is a romance and a relationship that I have yet to see modeled to me or experience myself, which is why I have this tendency to end up as the perpetually single friend. But what I desire the most, is this kind of like all-consuming, romantic, mystical, spiritual love. And I haven't found it yet. And I will not settle for anything less than that because I've gotten so good at being on my own, becoming my own best friend, and a bit like obsessed and almost addicted, maybe not in a good way, to this self-improvement journey, which is like I can always be working on myself. Always. And that is also a source of romance. Romance in myself, it's learning to love myself. So sometimes I actually have to be like, okay, let's stop, let's focus on like, we've done enough work here. And like, we can actually, the real work is doing that within the construct of a relationship, deal out those years every day. It's deeper,
Oh my God. I have 17 things to say about that. And it's crazy because I do find that it takes more effort to not look at things than to look at them, especially because, and we were just, we weren't recording, but we were having kind of like a check-in. We were both saying that like we are honoring avoiding because I think you and I both are people who confront things completely and fully and we dive into them and we enjoy the discomfort of looking at everything that hurts. Whereas I think a lot of people tend to lean towards masking and avoiding and distracting. And I found it to be medicinal to look away from things more recently, that radical avoidance that you were saying. And it's funny because I do think there's so much, and I'm curious to know what part of your chart you would attribute that to as well. But you are someone who loves to immerse themselves in the process to the point where maybe you like need to take a step back and let yourself live in the aftermath of your work. Have you always been like that?
Yeah.
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 Is that just the Piscean?
Well, it's the Piscean energy, but also that sun in the 8th house that I have.
That.
Because it's like I have no option to look away, but I have to drill deeply into everything. I need to have that sort of psychological understanding. It's funny because I joke around that I have this like fear of intimacy and romantic relationships, but actually I have, and this is what the 8th house is about, it's like that deep human intimacy, the taboo, like sex, death, and disease is what Passé, lives within the 8th house. So it's like I have this need to go deep all the time and to understand. But that's also just a construct of the mind, and like in the mind, you're dealing also with our programming and our developmental trauma and all the environmental factors. So it's like, again, as always is the case with astrology, like we have our birth chart, we have the planetary influences, and then of course we have our upbringing and the way that, our birth chart has manifested in our development, which is also affecting the way that we move through life.
100%. And I'd love to know, especially because I think that people can, well, before I even get to that, I also was just thinking about the fact that, not to bring up celebrities again, but Justin Bieber also has a Pisces Venus and Aquarius moon. And Justin Bieber is someone who I feel like we've all just kind of witnessed. And I think seeing him in his marriage, it seems as if he is more in love with the idea of love than the act of love itself.
Oh, God.
Right. And as a Pisces Venus to Pisces Venus, I've found.
What house do you have your Venus in?
In the 4th, very unfortunately.
Okay.
Right next to my Saturn. They're both there. Yeah. Yeah. Lots going on with me. But I do think that I found, because I think Pisces Venus especially can fall so in love with narrative and we can create worlds and live in them and we can be so maladaptive in that way. Do you ever have to confront the reality of things versus how you dress them up in your mind? Or do you think that people are settling for the reality of things? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the Pisces Venus is absolutely beautiful to have the placement. I mean, we know Venus loves to be in Pisces, it's exalted there, but it's delusional there.
So,
This is like the planet of love and connection in the sign of just like total union with all of the consciousness in the universe. Incredibly overwhelming. And I have a total tendency to romanticize everything in life. And then I get let down a lot. And so for me, the practice with my Venus in Pisces is to just like actually practice being more practical and more analytic, because I'm in this constant state of whimsy and romanticizing everything. And then I get down a lot. I mean, I get let down a lot, and it's just like, or no expectations. Because a lot of times, I mean, I have so many expectations that this person is going to be this way, or this vacation is going to feel like this. And you just have to always just surrender to what is. Like, what am I being shown right now? That's all I know. And creating this insane fairy tale narrative. Things should be different, or they're going to be different.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I've been working on finding delicious practicality can be. And I think that's also why Virgos and Virgo placements kind of seem to find me. I was raised by a Virgo. My partner is a Virgo Venus, which is a complete sister to my Pisces Venus. And I feel like they are constantly, yeah, just I think forcing me to see the ground beneath the sky that I'm soaring in. And I think people with charts like ours can really make a villain out of reality and practicality and think that it like is dimming our light, but I think it can actually truly support the fantasy that we live in, should we let them merge in the way that they're supposed to. So yeah, I think that's going to be a lifelong commitment, though, is like letting practicality not dim your whimsy.
Exactly. You said it so perfectly. And also understanding that like we are such creative people because we live in this state of whimsy, and we're always exploring through the ether. And a lot of people don't have access to those realms. We need to balance, the ether with the earth. But we have to just be so grateful that we're able to exist in that space and turn your experiences into art.
Yes.
That's what the Venus and Pisces really is.
Oh my God. And I feel like, I mean, it shows up for you in so many ways, but I do think that your writing is like the loudest way that you've been able to alchemize everything inside you.
Me too.
Thanks.
You too, both of us.
Yeah, and I would love to know about your relationship with writing, especially because I do think like a Leo moon as that like child that is so vibrant in a way kind of needs to create worlds, maybe to center themselves in them. But yeah, how did writing become a thing for you?
I love what you just said about create worlds to center themselves. Like, it's just so accurate. So, writing, I don't know. I always loved to read. And at some point, I discovered I loved to write. And then at some point, I started journaling. And I learned that writing about my experiences was really the only way to process them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it all stems from a love of reading and a love of imagination and being able to use imagination to create worlds. And it's a love of words and language, because
Yes.
it's not just like, I appreciate going to an art museum. I really do, but I'm not moved and transported to another world the same way that like reading a book,
Yeah.
So I don't know what exactly it is that makes words are, the medium.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate so much art, but books, it's always been books. And,
Yeah.
as somebody with just a really overactive mind and an overactive imagination, writing was just a way to move that energy through. And that's becoming more and more important as I get older, because I experience anxiety. Who doesn't? And I've learned that a lot of times when I'm feeling anxious and overwhelmed, it's just a neutral energy that I'm sort of projecting onto, being like, oh, that's anxiety. Something must be wrong. But oftentimes it's just an energy that needs to be moved through, transmuted, And so writing is the way that I do that. I mean, also movement, like dance and shaking and yoga, but really writing is what gets it out. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I think it was always in you, and you like, I think you kind of let it come through. Same. And I also, yeah, I have found I've almost held guilt for the way that like art in the form of paintings don't really move me. Unless it does. And when it does, girl. But like it's much more rare. But I mean, music and movies can break me, but I just didn't find that I had the ability to create in those spaces. But if I did, I would, for sure.
I think you and I are similar. I am like, music is my lifeblood.
Blood. Yeah.
I would not be alive. I am the most untalented like musician of all time, but my appreciation for music and what it does for me, and that's another Venus and Pisces thing, like that. 100%. I mean, of course, most humans love music, but I know you and I are operating on a different.
No, I've had to confront that some people do not feel the way, like I met someone recently who does not have any streaming service, like for music. Like they just, if they want to listen to something, they'll just like go on YouTube. And that made me realize, like, okay, we all love music because we're all like, human beings and like sound, but like some people relate to music in a way that shifts their DNA in the way that you and I do.
Yeah.
I guess that is the Pisces Venus, isn't it? I think a Pisces Venus will live in devotion to anything that moves
Yeah.
them. So, and I mean, and that's music, but for me, that's also sometimes like off, like my walks and like wind. You know what I mean?
Total.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly it. It's almost like being in, for me, and I think this is the Pisces Venus, and I know you're the same way.
Yeah.
It's like I'm tapped into a sort of psychedelic
Yeah.
dimension at all times. And it could be all the psychedelics that I've done. And I'm sure that plays a role.
That may
That
look like
it's, it's this ability to be moved by the tiniest thing, like moved to tears by the way the moonlight is reflecting off like the sea foam, and just like all of a sudden in that moment, it's like every existential fear just dissolves and you're just in this oneness. That's overwhelming because I actually don't know how often humans are supposed to exist in that state, because then you're like, what is capitalism? What is a sidewalk? There's that matters.
You have to protect that.
Yeah. I struggle in life because I'm just like crying at the way the leaves are falling. And it's like, oh no, I have to get to my doctor's appointment. Like I can't be crying about trees right now. So it's like a hypersensitivity and a hyper awareness.
Totally. Yes. Oh my God, I see that in you. I think it's something we have to radically protect in you, especially because I feel like there's some people who cannot access that. And I think in you, just like living in awe.
Yeah. Living in awe.
Yeah. I think that's so healing. I think that's part of your dharma, to like let people realize that they can choose to live in awe. How do you, being that way, still allow yourself to live a very human life? Like, how do you let yourself go into work, quote unquote, knowing that like your soul is in a constant yearning for something much more?
That's a good question. I mean, I've had to accept that there's a part I have to play in the human world that, like, for example, right now I'm dealing with the fact that my job, the way I make money, is not something that really ignites my soul. And for a while, I really let that tear me up inside. And now I'm like, no, this is a part of my day that's dedicated to a thing where even though it doesn't feel holy, it inherently is holy because it gives me the currency that I need to then be able to go and live a life that actually is holy and beautiful and transcendent. You know what I mean? So it's like compartmentalization that I've needed to do, and understanding, and this is a process. Like I'm not embodying this, it takes a long time, but understanding that getting up and going to the fucking post office and doing your taxes, like that actually is part of the spiritual. It's all spiritual. It's all out.
Yeah.
And so even and especially those things that are so annoying, which for me is like dealing with FedEx and the post office or correos if we're in Spain, whatever.
Yeah.
Like trying to just like trick myself into understanding like everybody here involved in this experience that's so unpleasant is God and is showing me that this is holy as well. It's like, then it just sort of becomes funny and silly. And it's all beautiful, and you accept all parts of life.
Oh my God, that's so huge. And I used to live in that. I feel like I weave in and out of living in that.
I'm not saying I'm living in it. I'm trying.
No, but you hit that wave and that stride of living in that. I remember you and I think we did this in the same week, and you had a funny story about it, but you don't have to tell. But like, remember we were like doing this thing, we were like looking at everyone we passed by.
Oh my God. No, I actually haven't been able to bring back that practice because of what happened that day, which I will tell that story.
Please. But I will say that that act made me realize that we can live in heaven by choice. And I don't think I've ever felt higher. I don't think any psychedelic, anything that I've ever taken has made me feel as high as it did. And so the act, for those listening, is, well, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was whenever you are walking or you're immersed in any kind of like place or setting where there are people around you, to like make eye contact and like send that person love or say that I love you in your head. Was that what it was?
Yeah. So, okay. This is something that I heard about from a woman called Chelsea Diane, who's just this like crazy magnetic woman.
Yeah.
And she's always attracting so much love and abundance into her life. And she was like, okay, my trick is that whenever I am anywhere and I need to raise my vibration, especially a place that really, like, you're walking around, you're passing a lot of people.
Yeah.
Every single person, you stare at them, you try to catch their eye. And in your mind, you just say, I love you. I love you. I love you to every single person.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to try this because,
Yeah.
I was living in Spain. A lot of times, if you're an immigrant, you can feel a bit like you're not fully integrated. And it was definitely an experience that I had the whole 9 years that I was living there. And I was like, this is actually like the perfect opportunity to feel more connected to the people here. So I'm going to go out here and try this. I'm walking around the neighborhood. I'm telling everybody I love them. A lot of people are catching my eye as well and smiling. I'm feeling so connected. And I was like, I could literally feel the energy like rising through my
Me
body
too.
into the
Yeah.
heart space. I was like, this is some powerful shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, but something's about to happen. Like I'm creating some sort of vortex and I'm attracting something right now. I don't know what it is. And then all of a sudden I got hit with this feeling of like, I'm about to run into my ex for the first time. And I hadn't seen him since we broke up. And he lives kind of in the neighborhood, not really, but I walk around there all the time, never saw him. I'm walking around telling everyone I love you. And I was like, oh my God, I'm about to run into him. And 5-10 seconds later, I'm saying I love you to this guy. And I really focus and it's him. And I'm in this like blissed out state. I probably look like I was high
Off anything.
and he's like all
Molly.
taken by the experience. And we had this conversation where I was just like, yeah, like I'm doing great. And I would have normally been terrified. I would have normally been having a panic attack to have this first encounter, but I was just in such a specific frequency from the I love you meditation.
Yeah.
And then I found out that he later said to his friend who said to me, like, oh, I ran into Tara. Like, it was wild. Like, she looked great. Like, something absurd like that. And I'm just like, yeah, I haven't. I honestly haven't done that in a while because it's so powerful
Yeah.
that it can be overwhelming.
It was the most overwhelmed I'd ever been, but in the best, I mean, I felt like my feet were not on the ground.
Exactly. It's an ungrounding experience.
It's an ungrounding experience, and I feel like lately I've had to feel the ground, but I will say, should anyone feel called to practice, it really was like, it was such a visceral, palpable shift in energy, very quickly too. But also I will say I was in Spain at the time too. And I feel like, I don't know, the Spanish landscape really lends to that kind of activity working. Yeah, I was like, I don't know if like, I mean, I guess if I go to the mall, but like,
I'm gonna go out and try this in New York City and see.
yeah, New York, I think you could, yeah, you can. In the cold, I feel like no one even has eyes to connect with, but yeah.
No, but seriously, for anybody listening, you need to try this. It's
so good.
It's a very, really beautiful experience and an interesting experiment to be able to sort of like manually adjust your frequency in that way and report back because it's helpful.
It was crazy, yeah. And also, I do think that experience was a testament to your intuition, which I'd love to talk about too. I think that, so I'm like looking at your chart and I'm like, I could attribute this to every single piece of it, but I do think that your intuition is something that is sharper than most. I'd love to know your relationship with your intuitive voice.
I wish it was more consistent, but like weird things are starting to happen, like prediction things. And this is not necessarily even intuition, but it's just like, it's random. Like, so intuition, I think, it's such a muscle. You need to work with it. Right now, I'm at a place where I'm like, I'm receiving intuitive information. I don't know what to follow, what not to follow. And then something else ends up being really right, or I end up not listening to my intuition and then regretting it. So I wouldn't say at this moment I'm in the strongest place with my intuition, but I know that when I'm really listening to my intuition, it's like it manifests as a knowing. It doesn't manifest as a voice or an image. It's just like a deep knowing. Like when I knew that I was going to leave the US to move to Spain, it wasn't like a thought process occurred. It was just I woke up and I said, okay, this is what's happening. How do we get it? And, having the sun in Pisces, any sort of planet in Pisces is going to give you access to intuitive gifts. But, there's also a downside to that because it's You're picking up on a lot of things that you don't know if it's yours, you don't know if it's somebody else's. And that's why, again, everything comes back to learning to actually, and this is what I struggle with, develop a disciplined relationship with yourself and your intuition. Create a system to be able to figure out when it's your intuition, when it's your anxiety that's speaking to you, so that you can work with it. And that is something that, for me as a Pisces, I'm always just like floating around. I'm like, discipline, I don't want to. What do you mean discipline? What do you mean practice? What do you mean,
Yeah.
effort? I just want things structured.
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. And part of my discipline as a Pisces Venus, recognizing how affected I am by the people that I interact with and the weight of their energy that they bring, and coupled with my Leo moon that truly in so many ways defines herself by other people's validation of her, and that's led to so many people pleasing. I've had to become okay with like no longer allowing people access to me. I mean, I'm fully gonna flake on a dinner that I said yes to tonight. And it's because I know that I'm in a sensitive place and there's someone who's gonna be at that dinner that every time I leave their presence, I feel absolutely drained. And I have no shame or guilt. And I'm not even gonna make an excuse. I'm really just gonna say I just don't have it in me. To say I have to protect my vessel because I will walk away with what is mine and yours, and I am struggling to carry what's just mine right now.
100%.
And that's part of, I think, yeah, I think any Pisces placement discipline paired with any Leo placement that struggles to, like, yeah, just to hurt how other people view them.
So I would say that's any heavy water sign is going to be dealing with that kind of experience, but
Yeah.
Pisces the most. But exactly, like, that is sort of the paradox of the Leo and the Pisces explained. Like, it's,
Yeah.
you have this desire to be social. That Leo moon is like,
Yeah.
I have so much love to give, and I want to be loved, and I want to give love, and I want to express myself, and I want to support people. I want to gas people up. I want to be just like surrounded by love. But then any sort of, intuitive sensitivity that you have, whether it's a lot of planets in a water sign or something like that, is going to automatically clash with that. So it's, again, the answer always, I feel like Saturn and everything that Saturn represents is always the answer. Case for me. So in your case, it's like boundaries, speaking your truth,
Yeah.
telling the truth, saying no. Like,
Yeah.
that is how, that's just what you have to learn to do. Because otherwise, and I spent years of my life just saying yes to everything. And it was like my Leo moon, my Leo rising needed that.
Yeah.
And I just left every hangout. And this was also how I knew I needed to leave Madrid. I was just like, wait, I'm leaving every hangout feeling more drained than energized. And no, I'm not built that way, but that's what's happening. So in your case, like, the fact that you're just saying, not only the fact that you're not going, like, you're protecting your peace, but the fact that you're telling the truth, lying, that is, so easy to be like, I'm not feeling well, but it's like, actually, what's easier? It's just telling the truth, and plus go up for it. And
I don't have the energetic capacity to show up in this space and also to perform, which I feel like how I've recognized when a person is soul nourishing versus not is obviously how you leave the hangout. But like, and I think why you and I mean, we've met so randomly and instantly connected. I think it was because there was no need for performance. And I feel like a Leo moon can perform a lot because we are on a stage in our own minds. We are on a stage. And I feel like you probably with the Leo rising especially feel this of like, yeah, I mean, we are just the star, and it's not necessarily in this like narcissistic manner, but more so in like this, just this constant awareness of self. And so I do think that I can sort of conform into a character, an archetype that I think I need to be in a setting. And so when you're in a space or with a person that can let you be completely naked, that is so medicinal. And like, that is what my soul needs. And so anytime I'm around a person, I feel like I need to dilute or hold or whatever, I can't do it anymore.
this is why it's so necessary for Leos to have actual deep relationships. But I think that it's ironic because Leos often find themselves, because they're so comfortable performing, they may find themselves in a situation where they're just surrounded by like admirers, but people who aren't actually seeing them. It's like they're seeing the performance.
Yes.
Like Leos especially really need to practice being seen in their worst. And
Yes.
that comes back to my intimacy issues that like we sort of shared a little.
No, but I've been told them every day. I don't know if I've ever really exclusively talked about this, or maybe we have talked about this, but like, and I've always felt uncomfortable bringing this up because it does make me seem like I think about myself in this way. But like, I found that a lot of people, or a lot of admirers that I've had in my life, have thought that they were in love with me.
Oh my God. I know exactly what you're gonna say.
And I would find it almost borderline offensive because I was like, you don't actually know me. And I'm just exuding this constant charisma that has almost poisoned you into thinking that we have a connection. But it's just because I connect with everyone because I am constantly just like displaying a version of myself that how could you not fall in love with? And so it's so interesting because when you are loved in a way that is actually true, it is so moving because you're actually seen beyond this like version of yourself you are constantly. And I think that that true love does come from letting yourself be completely ugly, which is a Leo moon's worst nightmare, you know?
Well, this is the pedestal, right?
Yeah.
So I get angry because someone has put me on a pedestal without realizing that actually I created the pedestal myself by being in a constant state of performing and charisma and,
But
you know, always being on.
the cool,
And then someone's like, and I'm like, you don't even know me.
you don't even know me.
You know, like, and I'm like, plot twist. Actually, that was only part of the story. And then they're like, show me the real story, show me the full story. And I'm like, no.
No.
And they compose you and they're like, I love you anyway. And I'm like, you could.
No. That's what we always talked about, like the
I'm
waking
like,
up the morning after. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We always have sort of attributed that to like the night before is so much fun, and then when like the morning sun is showing everything that couldn't have been hidden, you're like, get out of my home.
I
Yeah.
remember we had that exact verbatim conversation.
I know, I know, I know. That's just it's such a okay, well, I can go 12 hours on that.
Such a Leo moon thing. It is such a Leo moon thing. It's not an easy moon sign to have. I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't change anything about my birth chart. Actually,
That's one of the questions that I had. Yeah, yeah. But I will say my Leo moon is the most difficult part of my chart and one of my favorites.
of course.
Yeah. As a Leo moon would say.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. And I would say it's one of my most difficult.
Yeah. But I will say you wear it so beautifully. You wear it. The next part of you that I wanted to get into is your nomadic way of being, but I do think that that helps you survive the way that you live, I think, because you have such a fun home within yourself. I think people don't enjoy their solitude because they don't like what's going on within, but I think that beyond your Piscean nature to make things almost overtly introspective, I think your Leo moon keeps things fun for you.
My inner world is so, it's just lit. Like, it is crazy what's going on at all times.
I think it's just a rave. Have you seen Baby Girl, the movie?
No, not yet.
We'll talk about it later, but
Okay.
yeah, whatever. Continue.
I just think sometimes, like, if people could see what I do when I'm alone,
Yeah.
like, and that's your moon sign coming out, you know?
Yes.
And I love living alone. I've lived alone for a long time.
It's the biggest blessing I think a person can award themselves. Yeah.
But yeah, the Leo moon is tough, man. I honestly would like being like a Taurus moon or something like that.
I gotta tell you, I'm dating a Taurus moon. I would never wish that on my worst enemy. It's my favorite part of him and also the part I struggle with the most. But yeah, Taurus as a whole, whatever. Point is that I did want to know about your relationship with home because I do think that like you had to cultivate such, I mean, I think your home has had to have been conceptual because of the fact that your physical definition of home has changed so much, and you already spoken to like living in Madrid for 9 years and sort of having to redefine what home is. How have you made home a safe thing for you in the constant change of what it is?
I mean, I've tried my best, but I've learned that, well, first of all, some context. Yeah, home is a crazy concept. Like, I was born in New York City. I grew up right outside the city. I went to University of Wisconsin, all very normal. And then I sort of suddenly had like an obsession and fascination with Spain since I was young. studied abroad there. As soon as I graduated college, everybody was like getting their big kid jobs. And I was like, this sounds awful. I don't want to move to New York City and live in Midtown and work a 9 to 5. I'd rather die. I just want to go back to like where the pleasure is and the subject. Pleasure and sunshine is what I wanted. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move to Spain for a year, teach English, move to Mallorca, beautiful, gorgeous, stunning. I'm like, okay, now I want to be in a city. I'm going to go to Madrid for 1 year. 1 year turned into 8 or 9 years in Madrid. And then the past 2 years almost, I've been traveling, like doing the nomadic thing because my work is remote. So that's the context. And from an astrological standpoint, I have Pluto in the 4th house. And it's interesting because that placement to me used to be confusing because I was like, Pluto in the 4th house can oftentimes be like, I don't know, you have like serious abuse in your immediate family or a death in the immediate family.
Yeah.
Or addiction, Pluto has all of these associations. But actually, the 4th house is also about like your physical home.
Mm-hmm.
And having Pluto, the planet of transformation, of life and death, in the house of like your physical home, is in like the 4 walls that you surround yourself with, can manifest as someone who's really deeply existentially uncertain about what home means. So that's, you know, manifested in this tendency that I have to seek out novelty in terms of, where to live, where to settle down. And ultimately, the past 2 years of being nomadic has forced me to build home within myself.
Yeah.
But I would say before being able to build home in myself, I had to first realize how much of a home I didn't have within myself. And that was the whole unraveling. This was all sparked by my Saturn return.
Yeah.
Realizing just how out of alignment and in chaos my internal world was. And I wouldn't have been able to really see it unless I had been like, I'm going to go live out of a suitcase and travel the world and still maintain a job and live this crazy life. That really showed me how deeply out of alignment I was. So now I feel like I'm finally building a home within myself. And it's been a big, like, starting from zero. I mean, building a foundation is what I like to consider it. And it's like it all started with acknowledging that my nervous system has been in a really dysregulated state for probably my entire life and addressing that. And like,
Totally.
that's also something that drives the Leo within me, because like lots of cortisol, lots of energy, like how do you transmute that through like intense like connection with others and socialization and drama, storytelling, all of that, like I was just like, this is just sort of who I am. I'm like a really big, loud, audacious person. But then once I was traveling and I was alone and I had to really sit with myself, I was like, no, there's a very dysregulated. This is all dysregulation, actually, and lack of boundaries. So creating home within myself has really been about regulating my nervous system, which is a very long, slow process. And I would say the tool that's helped me the most is somatic experiencing therapy, which I love and could talk about forever.
Yeah.
And like very specifically, stepping away from talk therapy is really big.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm watching more and more people having to learn that realization the hard way. For the people that it works for, it works for. I mean, even like EMDR and stuff like that. But I've found that the most healing has been allowing my body to be what's being healed rather than like my brain. You know what I mean? Because then that's how my brain gets healed. Do you know?
If we use our minds to just further analyze and dissect and try to understand our trauma, it's like everything's happening here. We are not just our minds.
Yeah.
We need to actually get the body involved in the healing process, or else the trauma is never going to be released. We'll have a very good understanding about why we are the way we are.
Yes.
We'll have too much self-awareness to the point where it's crippling and we can't really do anything.
Yes. Oh my God. And especially I found that through that, I've gotten too good at intellectualizing my emotion, which I do so well. And even as you know, I'm kind of going through a moment right now, and my Saturn return has been very literal and loud. And I've been kind of processing everything that I'm going through mentally and tricking myself into thinking that I'm okay because of the fact that I've been confronting everything intellectually. And then I was telling you about how I did like hot yoga for the first time in a long time. And our instructor kind of had us really sit, and it was like, I think, frog pose, where my hips were just completely open. And I had to walk out of the class early, and I sat in my car and cried 3 months worth of pain. And it was all just because it was living in my body and I had not let it be expressed because I was thinking about it rather than like feeling it. And yeah, and so somatic work has really been the most efficient when it comes to allowing things to move through. And I also had to resist the urge to like go home and then like journal about what I had just released. And so it was accepting like something just moves through me and like that's enough, you know? Like I don't need to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you just said. I do think that like sometimes with the somatic stuff, it can be so intense that you do need to have a certain level of safety, but maybe go into that.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't recommend it to just anybody if they're in crisis. And someone who has been through a lot of talk therapy, understands their trauma and their patterns and their tendencies, whatever, stop talking about it. Stop. Being all like, you gotta move it through. CST was so happy that you had that release, and I would encourage you to really continue to prioritize that kind of somatic experience, because what happened to me when I went through my whole, nervous breakdown while traveling was that, yeah, I just hadn't allowed myself to feel.
No.
And it's so funny because I pride myself on being a feeler. And I thought that because I can cry easily, that means that I'm feeling my emotions. That's not true at all, actually. And I was like, oh, because I'm so Piscean and, such a watery person, I'm good on the emotion front, but actually being able to cry tears does not mean that you're feeling your feelings. It does not mean that you're honoring your emotions. It's so much harder than that, which is what's so crazy.
It's so much harder than that. Oh my God, that's yeah. And I just feel like we don't. A lesson that I'm learning is that like we can be so unaware of the grief that we're carrying because I think we can define grief to be something that's so black and white when like you could be grieving anything. Like there's a constant, and maybe this also has to do with where Pluto lies in your chart, but like I feel like there's like constant deaths that are happening in all of the beautiful rebirths, but like you have to give yourself space to mourn the endings and the change. Yeah.
All of life
You.
is grief. It's
Yes.
for someone like me. It's be starting a new chapter full of so many beautiful things, and I have so much grief for the old chapter. And I wish it didn't have to be that way. But the more I try not to allow myself to grieve and to honor, it will come up to haunt me. And it's sort of like what you said the other day, which was so beautiful, and that's what made me emotional. As you were like, I feel like I am leaving girlhood and my maidenhood behind. And that's the natural way of things. We leave it behind when there, and you step into, a new way of being, whether it's actual motherhood or just sort of being willing to enter that space energetically as like an itch. But it's like, not only are you stepping into the new way of being, but you got to grieve the old way of being. And it's just everything. Life requires so much of us. If you are a sensitive person who's really here to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
And it's like, when am I supposed to do my fucking taxes? This is like the intensity and the emotions, and it's just, ugh. And that's why, just to circle back, I'm just practicing to the best that I can, just like radical avoidance when possible. I'm like, I will be processing this right in this moment. Like,
Yes. Oh my God. No, that's exactly it. I mean, to know me is to know that like I'm really good at keeping my inner child alive. And I thought that was
really hard.
something I thought I could get away with that for the rest of my life. And then I think my Saturn return has shown me that you kind of have to go through the grieving process first. I would assume at the tail end of my Saturn return, I'll be able to resurrect her in a way that honors her moving through life alongside me. But I really had to completely step into the next archetype and like let 12-year-old me die, who I was holding on to so tightly. And I think that that's part of the whole thing. I think it's unavoidable. But I wanted to do a quick little rapid fire round before I ask you the last question. So, what is your own favorite placement in your chart?
I think it's my sun in Pisces. Trine Pluto, which is just like, it's it's not easy, but just like knowing that that transformation is woven into my essence and is something I'm supposed to face every day, the like death rebirth. I'm just like, okay, bring it on at this point, whatever. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I'd say it's the most poignant. Also, I love my Venus in Pisces.
Yeah. I think it's my favorite too. What's your least favorite placement of your chart?
I think it's my Mars in Aquarius because it falls into the seventh house. I love Mars in Aquarius.
Yeah.
I like that blending of energies, but the Mars seventh house, it's like right. I have my Mars conjunct Saturn straddling the descendant. So it's just like,
I
it's intense.
It's inspiring to hear you appreciate Mars and Aquarius because it's my least favorite from Mars.
I just love Aquarius. I love
Yeah,
them so
yeah, yeah. Well, I have enough of it in the rest of my chart, but I will say, yeah, I get you honoring it in that way. And I do see the Aquarian in you very loudly, which is so funny.
oh, that's an honor. Oh.
Absolutely. If you could sort of define your Saturn return by one lesson, what would have the lesson been?
No, my Saturn return was different from yours. It
Yeah.
was much more subtle in the way that it was like a very slow crumbling of my relationship. So I have my Saturn in Aquarius in the sixth house, which is all about daily routines. How do you wake up and start your day and live your week through it? How does that affect your health, et cetera, et cetera? Ultimately, my Saturn return was meant to teach me about discipline.
Yeah.
And that's not just because Saturn is inherently about discipline, but it's
Right.
that sixth house, that repetitive daily,
Right.
how you carry yourself from 9 to 11 a.m. every day. And this was a period of time where I was floating and I had no structure. And so the lesson I did not learn for a long time, but it was to, there is beauty in the structure of things and the routine. And I needed to learn to stop glorifying spontaneity and that actually I'm not really meant to go with the flow.
Oh my
As
God.
many people. So I can't really like distill it down to one lesson, but I was meant to learn how to work with discipline
Yeah.
and routine. I feel like I got off the hook pretty damn easy with that. I'm gonna go on to say that, like, yeah, things related to Pluto have been more difficult than aside.
Right. Yeah, I do think that we made a villain out of Saturn return when like sometimes there are other
I
trans.
do. I have to say, my Saturn return was not that bad.
Yeah.
What happened after the Saturn return was really, really bad. So I want people to understand that like, your Saturn return is not necessarily something to be terrified of.
No.
It was not.
No. Totally. Unless you have the one I'm going through, which is
You're
spirit.
yeah.
I honor Saturn, and I think that everything Saturn has ever brought into my life has been for me. And I mean, if there's any planet that is going to change you or give you no choice but to change yourself, it's Saturn. So
Yeah.
shout out to him. What is one album you'd play aliens if they were to land on the planet and we need to introduce to our sonic arts?
Well, definitely something by Pretty Lights, which you knew would be my
Yes. You are pretty lights through and through. It was great.
yeah, or maybe I mean it would be some sort of like if not Pretty Lights, like some sort of but actually maybe I wouldn't want to play them like experimental electronic music because that might be what they're listening to already.
Yeah, they're like, let's get into some human work. Yeah.
Wait. Okay, hang on. Maybe it would
That's
be something more like I don't know. I'm gonna circle back to that. But
okay.
very good question.
Yes, I ask it every like artist interview. I always ask, and I'm always yeah. And I get a lot of people always say like
I know what it would be. I know what it would be, and this is kind of obscure. Butterfly 3000 by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, which, but it's like, I don't know if you know them. Me too. They're an Australian band. They put out about 5 albums a year.
okay.
They do everything from thrash metal to jazz to R&B. It's so strange what they're capable of. I'm getting really into them now.
Yeah.
And this one album is perfect start to finish.
Okay.
3000 by King.
Please, yeah, send that to me after this because that's huge. I'm like, what a range of genre, darling.
Wait, what's your answer?
It changes. It changes. I think probably Love Deluxe by Sade, just because I feel like that's just like, yeah, like if I could give you love in sonic form, it would be Sade.
Oh my God, your answer was so good.
but it just,
You want to hear something funny? He's telling you that my intuition shows up in really weird ways that don't make sense.
yeah.
Before we met, I said somehow Sade is going to get brought up in this conversation today. Why would we end up talking about Sade? You know,
Before we, like today or like,
today, I was like, oh, I wonder what me and Jazz are going to talk about. And then I'm just like,
shut it. No, but you're truly the most intuitive person that I know. And that's why I was like, we need to talk about intuition. But I do think it's just because you not only are Piscean, but like you lean into your Piscean nature instead of like distracting your body from it. Because I do see a lot of, and yeah, and I think the shadow and the light of every sign is that I think Pisces can fall into, well, maybe you are also manipulative in like your own way. But like, I feel very,
sure.
I think they can be very manipulative and not be aware of it when they don't allow themselves to lean into the gifts of what being a Pisces is. But that's a side bit. What would little you think of your life right now?
You would be so confused.
Nice.
But like in the most like perplexed, like, oh, I didn't expect this for us, and that's cool. Right now I'm in New York City, which is where I'm from. So I'm confused. I've been running away from this my whole life. I haven't wanted to deal with this, and I'm finally facing it. So little me would be like, oh, did you end up in New York? Like, that's kind of basic of you. And I'd be like, no, honey, we've been circling the globe for a long time. We're doing a nice long pause in New York. I think she'd be so proud of how much I have fearlessly traveled and prioritized.
Fearlessly.
Yeah.
You have seen the most beautiful sunsets I think any human has, really. And I've seen the sunset through your eyes, so that's been incredible to see. I think she's so proud of you. So, a last sort of tidbit to anyone who has any of your placements, and that's me included, what's a piece of advice you would give for them to live their most authentic version of self?
I am currently obsessed with the fact that creative self-expression is a requirement for life.
Yeah.
And whether your sun is in Pisces or your North Node is in the 5th house, which is like my favorite thing about my little chart.
Yes, yeah.
That's my favorite thing.
That's favorite thing. Yeah, North Node of the 5th house is incredible.
Because it's showing me that I need to use discipline to create my art.
Yeah.
That's how my soul evolves to its, to my highest good. I would say to anybody with a birth chart, which is everybody on planet Earth, express yourself, create. That is the way forward. That is the ultimate alchemy of anxiety, depression. And it's not just like make art. It's have the bravery to say, I love you first.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Have the bravery to write a little note on a piece of paper and give it to the person that you have a crush on at the coffee shop. Like, express yourself. That is, I think that if we are expressing ourselves and most importantly, like living in truth and honesty, telling the truth, being our authentic selves, you cannot go wrong, no matter what placement you have, no matter anything. And I think that all of us, like, there's a part of us that's going to tell ourselves that our story or our art or our message isn't worth sharing because, it's very distinct to us. And what if it doesn't impact anyone? It will.
Yes.
It 100% will. And you have to share it anyway. So, yeah.
That was ridiculous. You've channeled something so far beyond us both in this conversation. I know.
I feel like this was actually the most grounded by far.
I know. Usually it's like 7 hours of us like in some room, like, yeah, just absolutely bouncing off the walls. But I do think that this was at the very least a way where it could be packaged to maybe spark something within someone else. And I knew you had to be the first person to ever do this with because of the fact that I am constantly learning from you in how naked you have allowed yourself to be in front of me and even in front of yourself. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, I in the intro would have said this already, but you are one of the most brilliant writers that I know. Please let people know how they can find your work and continue to follow you should you continue to express yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to be more active on Substack. I'm obsessed with Substack.
Yes.
It's just like the only corner of the internet that doesn't like want to die. So
yeah.
Find me there at Tara Keeny, TaraKeeny. I'm on Instagram too, but mostly just posting ridiculous shit. But it's pretty funny over there. So
It is. It's so good. Yes. And every piece of writing that you've shared has honestly, I think, been so immediately tied to your Dharma. So thank you for continuing to inspire me, to have hopefully inspired anyone that's had the pleasure of listening to you just guide and give today. I love you. I don't think I could be the fullness of myself had you not come into my life and given me permission to find it okay to be the fullness of myself, because you have made me feel safe in the parts of me that I never even had language to define, truly. And I'm so excited and grateful that I can get to continue to do this whole self-life discovery thing alongside you. Absolutely.
Oh, I feel the same way. Like us meeting and giving each other permission was
Permission. Yes, you are my life partner for sure. Thank you. I love you. Thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform to catch the next big three. See you then.